Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sharp Vision with 25, the podcast that discusses the benefits of prioritizing project pricing in your business strategy and why it matters. Today, I'm joined with Doug Pitcher, Manager of Material and Labor Estimating for Sikorsky Aircraft within Lockheed Martin, and Richard Minnie, co-founder and CPO of 25, to discuss the material cost estimating strategies for aerospace and defense firms and how to ensure compliant, accurate, timely, and confident bids and proposals. Thank you so much for being here, Doug. We're excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for being willing to join and speak about your expertise. To start things off, I'd love to hear a bit about your background. Tell us about yourself and your material cost estimating experience for government contracts and bids.
Out of college, long time ago, graduated in 83, started at Sikorsky in 84, started in material and labor estimating actually. Did that for many years, both aircraft, engineering change proposals, spares. Did pricing also. I was the pricing manager for a bunch of years. Went back to estimating. It's funny, we started off as a job order company, accounting in 84. We went to a standard cost company in 92. Did that through 2005. And as Richard knows, because he helped, we went to SAP in 2006. Went back to job order with SAP. And I was there till 2019 is when I retired. So 35 years doing mostly material and labor estimating, pricing for a bunch of years. That's kind of my good luck charm, I'll call it. I've been doing it a long time.
Good. Well, we're bringing that luck to the podcast and to all the listeners here too. Thank you.
Sure.
So to dive into the topic today, my first question for you is, why is material estimating often the longest part of cost estimation processes? And what are the biggest bottlenecks that teams face when trying to speed up this process?
Yeah, so I've actually owned salary less estimating folks also in the proposal process. And, with all the inputs you get in any given proposal, material is by far the long pole because it's not all on people that work at your company, right? Most of the money, unless you have long-term contracts with your supplier, is going to be quotes from your suppliers, right? So it's not all on your hands. It's up to your suppliers to respond to those bids in a timely manner, and you can't necessarily always control them, right? Some are good, some are not, some are small, some are big. They don't all have as good a systems as you may have, so you're really at their mercy in responding in a timely manner, right? So it's always I'll say, you can't get your solicitations out quick enough, and you can't get them back quick enough, right? And there's a lot of back and forth, I'll call it, in getting the responses you need for a compliant proposal. So that whole, from A to Z process, to me, by far is what is why proposals will take as long as they take, especially large ones.
And there's a vast volume of data, isn't there, Doug, as well?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. I mean, if you're competing and you can get competitive quotes where you're getting more than one response, you don't need that cost or pricing data support on that bid from that supplier. So that makes it a bit easier. When it's sole source under TINA threshold, you don't need the cost or pricing data, but when it's over, you need that compliant proposal for their cost or pricing data that needs to be as good as your own, and your submittal directly to the government from every supplier that meets that criteria. So that's a chasing game too. Sometimes you'll get their prices back, and that could take 30 to 60 days. And it's like, okay, where's the data that supports that? When you're over TINA, it's usually followed up later, and you're always chasing, right? The good guys who are really good at it might get it to you, 45 to 90 days. Which, government wants a proposal in 90, right? That whole process, and then chasing that data. And God forbid, if you get a $10 million sole source quote and that supplier has two suppliers that are also sole source under that TINA threshold, they're chasing those guys, right? So, it just keeps getting pushed back and back and back. And depending on the situation, it takes quite a lot of time. So that is by far why material estimating is typically the long pole in getting a proposal out. I'll add this, even if you don't have that data you need, the government, often might say, all right, well, give me what you got. And then you owe me, right? Follow it up. Give me dates when you're going to get this stuff, right? And then we'll follow it up later. But, in an ideal world, you want it all up front so they can do because now the DCA is waiting for all this information to really start and finish their audit, right? So the quicker you can get all that data to them, the better the whole contracting process is. Yeah.
So you've stated the problem that the bottleneck that these firms are facing, but what are some of the best techniques that you've seen in your experience to accurately estimate the cost of materials in these proposals? What has and hasn't worked that you've seen?
Before you even can start to estimate, you need good and accurate bills of materials, right? So depending on the RFP and what the job is, if it's just buying more production aircraft or spares or whatever, you sell missiles, whatever, you typically are going to have a robust bill of material. If you're bidding competitive development kind of stuff where you're relying on an engineer to come up with the bill of material that you'll estimate with that isn't necessarily production, that's a risk, right? One could argue, should that be a fixed price contract or should it be a cost type contract? Government likes fixed price. That's where I would argue aerospace companies are at risk if they're fixed pricing competitive development work. There's a risk there because you want to give your best price to win the competition, but at the same time, your bill of material better be robust enough to recover whatever cost you might incur. And I've seen, unfortunately, too many losses where you sharpen your pencil to give your best price, but if that bill of material isn't robust enough to cover the cost you're going to incur, you're going to lose money. If it's fixed price, you're done. So I always would argue for cost type contracts there, but the government likes their fixed price stuff, so they know how much money they're spending. So that's a real risk when you're just refreshing production bills of materials and spares. A lot safer. The bills of materials should be robust, and you're much better off for it.
Yeah, so the stakes couldn't be higher because you've got very expensive bids, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
You haven't necessarily got reliable data because the bill of material might be being developed or might not be fully completed because there's something new.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the government, as you say, they want a fixed fee, but they also want a full cost breakdown of how it costs what it costs.
Yeah. I mean, if you're ever doing things on the fly, and I can give you my worst scenario I remember where, our engineers and programs folks were in a certain country and this country wanted us to create a kit for them, right, to upgrade their aircraft, right?
Mm-hmm.
All rush. And, the engineers and programs folks sent me a bill of material, handmade, right? Hey, here's what we think it's going to take, right? I estimated that bill. We got the contract. 2 years later, after we deliver and we incur our actuals, I get called, say, hey, we lost $10 million, Doug. What did you do wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, well, let me look at the actuals, right? And I said, all right, I got my bill of material you gave me an estimate with. I'm looking at the actuals for those parts. We were right on. It's these 9 parts that were in the actuals that weren't in your bill of material for the estimate where we lost the $10 million, right? They forgot major parts that ended up being in the design once they designed it, was not in the estimate. It was fixed price, not cost type. So we ate it, right? So it's all about when you're in those situations, it's imperative for engineering to get that bill of material correct. And if they're not comfortable with it, they need to speak up. I usually do when it's not a production bomb bill of material to programs to say, hey, this shouldn't be fixed price perhaps, but if and when it becomes fixed price, you're open to losses, and we've incurred them that way.
Right.
So that's a risk.
And how would a systemic quoting solution improve the accuracy and speed of RFQ responses, as opposed to maybe relying instead on emails and manual communication?
We all estimate the material, but we do it very differently. Some do email quotes. They don't have a quoting system, which kind of shocked me because that's just archaic to me. I mean, talk about slow that you don't, and it's dangerous, right? And then they're typing stuff into their systems as their estimate. It's just very slow. Sikorsky has what they call an e-source system that we built. You hand build it, which worked pretty well. It had its issues, but pretty well. So each unit, each segment of Lockheed seemed to do it differently, right? And there were different characteristics, good and bad, with each one. So to me, to have a robust quotation system to your suppliers is the key. It's funny because the buyers, when they go out they have their PRs in the queue and they go quote their PRs to their suppliers. Most of the systems I've seen are built around that, right? You got to get your PRs placed in a timely manner to get the parts in-house to be able to deliver all your products on time, so it's all imperative and important. But typically the MCE folks, the material cost estimating folks, utilize that same system in soliciting for their proposal quotes. Those proposal quotes are often much more complex than a PR and a buyer's queue, right? MRP spits out into a buyer's queue, go buy 100 of these, 5 a month for 20 months over time. You go bid it, bid comes back. Proposal quotes, you may need scales in there. You may want to know how the supplier would want his quantities curved. All this communication needs to happen in a quotation system, and they typically don't. So you would want an estimating or a proposal system that is flexible enough to allow the supplier not only to input it well or to upload into it, but to edit quantities where they should, so forth, right? We often want fixed price quotes from our suppliers, right? Well, ever since COVID and inflation hit, very few suppliers, I would argue, are willing to fix price out too many years. So if I'm quoting out to 2030, say, I will ask for fixed price for all those years. But if the supplier is only willing to fix price for the first 2 and not the last 3, I want fields in my proposal quotation system to know that, so that I don't have to read notes for hundreds of line items to know what I have. I need to be able to report based on interrogating fields that they can edit that says, oh, this guy fixed price for all 5 years. Cool. I can just run with that. But this guy only did it for 1 year and he put not to exceed or a ROM on the last 4 years. I want to know that fast because I got to go talk to that guy. I got to go fix that, right?
Yeah.
To have to read through notes where that system doesn't give you that kind of information that you can just read in reporting is key, right?
Yeah.
So it's all those kind of dynamics in a system. You're going to want to be able to read systemically so that you can move quicker. If you send out a quote for, say, 20, 50, and 100 pieces, but they're independent, they're only going to buy one of those 3. Personally, I would argue that maybe even should be 3 different quotes, because if you just total up all of that and it's over the $2 million, I don't need cost or pricing data if those individual quantities are under 2 million because they didn't cross the threshold. I'm only buying one of those quantities, not all 3.
Yeah.
Right. So the quicker you can get at that level of detail, the quicker you're going to move. I want a supplier, when he's bidding a quote, to know on individual option, if it's over 2 million, I'm going to want that cost of pricing data. He has to know to go get that and give it to me quickly. If it's just a total of 3 million, but across options, each option has to cross the 2 million for me to require that cost of pricing data, not the total of 3 million across 3 options. Right. So it's that level of detail. I think that to the extent your system can have it, you're much better off for it, and you'll move quicker.
The essence of the challenge you're describing is that on a purchase requisition, or PR as you called it, everything's pretty stable and you kind of know what's going to happen. It's happening pretty soon.
Yep.
But with a proposal quote, it's a range of possible outcomes. You don't really know exactly which option the customer is going to go for, how long the contract's going to last, how many they're going to order. You have some ideas, but you don't know. So the quotations are much more complex, hence the quantity scales and the date ranges and the curve factors and everything that has to be incorporated into that, so you understand what the different outcomes could be.
And I'll tell you, because I've lived there for many years, that the RFPs you get from the government change all too often. They change their quantities, and it's really a setback. If you didn't do the scale stuff, which I know MFC does a lot of, because the quantities change and then they'd be in a position to adjust to it quicker. I get it. The way Sikorsky's historically worked, we quote our hard quantities. If the customer comes in and changes those quantities, we're going to have to requote. So it does set you back.
That's the downside of that.
So that's the downside.
Yeah.
So we have those discussions with the government and their RFPs to make sure, because if you change it, it's going to be a setback, and they appreciate that, right? So it's funny because all different companies do it a little different, right? But if the key is to have a system that's flexible enough, where you can move quicker.
You talked about the importance of the system and having the fields, but what would be other characteristics of an ideal quotation system?
The bottom line is whatever system works best for how you do business. Lockheed right now, right, they're trying to get to one system that works for everybody, right? So, you want it to be the same. That makes sense, but and it's funny because we're starting with MFC going to this new system, and they probably do solicit the most complex quotes of any of the units I've seen in Lockheed. So that's maybe a good thing, right?
Yes.
The system they're going to get may not be what they need out of the box, but it should be able to get enhanced enough for them in the long run that it'll
Yeah.
satisfy them. And if it satisfies them, I think it'll work well for all the other units. Proposal quotes were very much secondary, right? I mean, I've sent it out and I just wanted to make sure he bid it 2 weeks later and he still didn't even get to it, right? So that's
Wow.
unacceptable. They need to go out the next day, right?
Yeah.
But if you're behind in placing your POs, which they typically are, right? They get all kinds of less than lead time reports that say you should have placed this PO a month ago. What are you doing?
Mm.
You better go get that done. He's going to take care of that first. Personally, I like the group concept, taking it away from the buyers. If the group needs to ask the buyer a question because they might know something they don't know, call the buyer, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I like the group approach. I think it's better. It serves the proposal process certainly better because now the buyers can buy, go place your POs that you got to place, and we're getting our proposal quotes via that other group. I'm definitely a fan of that. I've lived both ways.
And so you've talked about what makes a good quotation solution, but what about communication and how can improved communication between supply management, suppliers, and estimators transform the cost estimating workflow and lead to more competitive bids ultimately?
Yeah, I don't know if it would lead to more competitive bids per se, but I'll say this. One thing that Sikorsky got very much into because, the government's tough, right? They audit you. They audit your estimating system, right? It's got to be accurate, compliant, all that kind of good stuff. Well, that also holds true of all your suppliers, right? They're held to the same standard. So one thing Sikorsky did a lot of, and I'm sure they always do because they're always, there's always a new supplier or different suppliers. We train our suppliers as to how to do compliant proposals, right? So there's a lot of communication and training along those lines with, because the government holds us to that standard that also your suppliers have to give as good a cost of pricing data as we do, right? It's got to be part of that sole source over $2 million threshold, if met, that we need that data to be as good as our own, right? And it often is not, right? So you could say this whole process we're all talking about flows down to every supplier when it applies. So we do a lot of training with our suppliers in that regard. We have scorecards for them, who's good, who's bad, not only for quality, but for compliant proposals, and who needs more training, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of communication in that way, and it's a lot of work, but it's worth doing because it speeds you to contract, right? You need it. You got to have it. So a lot of that happens, and that's it's not even really the buyers doing that. It's, we have something called a CAP, or the cost and price analysis we do, which is our audit, if you will, of the sole source quotes over the 2 million, where those folks do an audit of that proposal. It's these folks that know what's required in that proposal, and if it's not good, they'll train that supplier. So that communication is key to keep that going.
To wrap up the episode, we'd love to hear a little bit about you and your experience of what you love about your job and what you hate about your job, because we know there's always both sides.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll say this, because like I said, I used to do pricing also, and I really enjoyed that because, again, a difference, right? The price analysts that price the stuff were the lead negotiators at the table. I loved that. Right? Telling the government why I'm right and they're wrong kind of thing, right? Why our material and labor is good, their audit is bogus, blah, 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 so tip of the spear, the price analysts, we were signing the certificates of current cost of pricing data after the negotiations, certifying to it. Yeah. The one thing I also liked and didn't like kind of at the same time, always busy. It never gets bored.
Right.
I like being busy, but I don't want to fall too far behind because there's nothing worse. In my 35 years, I probably had, 10 days where I may have been bored, where there was actually nothing to do. It's horrible. I like staying busy, and that was a good thing for me. So I like that. I've never not
It's highly reactive, isn't it?
Oh,
you're always on deadlines to get.
Oh yeah, and it was stressful, but you get used to it. The deadlines are killer. You always got, and again, because material was the long pole. Right? Everybody's like, why does it take so long? Why does it take so long? Well, give me some budget to make my systems better and I could speed it up. But no matter how quick you speed it up, you're always going to be too slow. But no, I got to say I enjoyed it. I mean, I got an accounting degree at Bentley from college, but I've never done accounting. I never would want to. It was just the best major to have at the time, I'd say. Maybe, I'll say this too. I didn't need to go to college for what I was doing. You learn it on the job, material and labor estimating. I'll tell you that. At Sikorsky, we had some issues with accurate bills of materials and that kind of stuff, but I've got to enjoy it. It kept me engaged. And I think my people enjoyed it because I want to say I probably had as many as, well, when I had labor estimated and salary labor estimate, 80 or 90 people working for me. But typically material estimators had like 15 of them, and they all stayed with me for over 20 years. So I think they enjoyed it too. They didn't want to move on, which I took as a compliment, I guess.
Of course.
They were with me forever. I mean, at one point I did the math, and there were 13 of us who had like 400 some odd years experience. It was something crazy. It was a huge number. You don't find that too often anymore. People kind of move around. It was a good job. It was a satisfying job once you get the contract. You think you're doing well for the company. So that was all good. That was all good. I want to say cons wise, the amount of hours you work can get you, right? The work-life balance kind of thing. But here's the con for you. I'll throw out a con for you. Multi-year 8, biggest contract at the time United Technologies ever got. It was like over 1,000 Blackhawks. To get the proposal out, I worked 90 16-hour days in a row, including Saturdays and Sundays.
Wow.
112-hour man weeks. It was awful.
Yeah.
I went up to my boss and I actually said, I just worked $300,000 of uncompensated overtime. My bonus better be really good.
Right.
Was it?
It was horrible. I mean, the Army, the satisfying thing was the Army said this is the best supported proposal we've ever seen. So that was good, but it didn't make up for the overtime.
Yeah.
So it can be stressful and take a lot of time, but it was rewarding, I'll say.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that and for coming on the podcast. Thank you.
All right, take care, guys.
Doug.